If you're ready to take your card making to the next level, you're in the right place. Today, I'm sharing 13 advanced DIY card making hacks that will help you get more out of your supplies, add extra polish to your projects, and honestly make the whole process more fun. You might have seen some of these tricks before, but I promise there are a few in here that will surprise you in the best way. Let's jump into these next level ideas that will help you create with more confidence and a little extra creativity. Let's dive in. All right, let's kick things off with a super fun technique, mirror stamping. I've seen this quite some time ago on another crafter's channel, but unfortunately I just couldn't find that channel again and couldn't remember the exact process, so I had to reinvent my own to create the same outcome. I'm using this absolutely adorable stamp set today, and check out this little baby elephant. Isn't it just the cutest? Now here's the thing, if I stamp this little cutie as is, she's always going to be facing the same way. But what if I want to create a mirrored image, like maybe two elephants looking at each other? Well, after a bit of experimenting, I found a totally foolproof way to do this using acetate and a trusty stamp positioner. And in my case, that's the Misty. First things first, make sure your acetate is nice and clean. You don't want any stray ink accidentally transferring where it shouldn't. And here's a little handy tip for you. Since I'll be stamping with black ink and the background of the Misty is also black, I'm going to slide in a piece of white copy paper behind the acetate so I can see what I'm stamping. And I'll use my magnets to hold the acetate firmly in place to avoid ghosting. Next, I'll bring in my card front that I want the mirrored image on. I want to have two elephants facing each other with the sentiment in the middle, so I want to plan the layout perfectly before I stamp anything. The complete design needs to be centered on the card front, so I'll take my time for this step. I'm lining up the card front with the side of the Misty to help with alignment. Use a hinge technique with some washi tape to keep your card front perfectly aligned with the acetate. Just tape it down so it opens like a little door. I'll place the little elephant on the card front where I'd like to stamp the image and pick it up with the Misty door. Next, I'll lift up the card front and flip it back at the hinge to expose the acetate, since I'll be stamping the acetate to create the mirror image. Ink up your stamp really well. Make sure that the ink pad you're using is nice and juicy so you get a beautiful transfer. Then carefully stamp onto the acetate, flip down the card front, and gently rub to transfer the image. And just like that, you've got a pretty perfect mirror image. Such a fun little trick, right? Now that our reverse elephant is looking good, I'm bringing in the original stamp again. Make sure you clean the stamp well so you don't transfer any ink to the card front while trying to place the stamp. This time, I'm positioning it so the two little elephants are facing each other. I'll take my time with this step because I want to make sure both elephants are on the same level so the design looks balanced and intentional. And if you want to see how I finish this card, please keep watching. And now we are ready for hack number 2. For this next one, I'm reaching for that trusty acetate again. This time, it's going to help me perfectly align the second elephant as well as the sentiment. By first stamping onto the acetate with the black ink, I can see exactly where they're both going to land on my card front before I actually commit to the final stamping with the ink I want to use. Once I'm happy with the placement and it looks just right, I simply stamp directly onto the card. And just like that, it's done. This hack I picked up from Gina K of Gina K Designs, and it has been a really handy one. I'll repeat the same steps with the sentiment and complete the stamping. So there you have it, 1 acetate and 2 mind-blowing ways to use it. Mirror stamping combined with acetate alignment can be total game changers for your next card making project. Since the mirror stamped image may not look as bold and bright as the regular stamped image, I like to use my Pigma Micron fine point pen to just brighten it up a little. I think this one is the 01. And also it helps relax my perfectionist mind a little bit. By the way, if you're looking for the list of supplies, you'll find affiliate links in my blog post that's linked in the video description. While they won't cost you anything extra, it will definitely help out my channel. Thank you so much if you decide to support me. See, now that looks much better, doesn't it? All right, let's move to the next hack that adds a really elegant touch to your card fronts without needing much effort. I want to show you a really simple and elegant border that you can create using just your scoring board. I saw Jennifer Maguire do this and it's really brilliant. So this piece is 4¼ inches wide. I'm going to add score lines at 4 inches, but here's the trick. I don't want the lines to be debossed. I want them embossed on the card front. So I'm going to flip the card over before I score. Here is another quick hack. When you're scoring, just pull your cardstock down a bit so your scoring tool fits nicely into the groove. It gives you more control, especially with heavyweight cardstock like this. All right, now that I've scored one side, I'm going to do the same on the other. This piece is 5½ inches tall, so I'm scoring at 5¼ inches. And since I had a little oopsie with the scoring tool, I'll just smooth that out by rubbing with the scoring tool again. That's another little hack. If you mess up a score line, you can often just press it out gently. Okay, let's go back and score again at 5¼ Just simple score lines, but it creates such an elegant frame. Fits perfectly on an A2 card base. Now this one I had stamped a bit too close to the bottom, so I won't add another score line there. But if you left some space, you could absolutely add a second score line to the frame. So yeah, your scoring tool is great for borders, clean, elegant, and perfect for special cards like weddings or anniversaries. And if you take the time, you can score these borders in many different ways, whether straight like I did it, diagonal, single lines, double lines, more lines, it's up to you. So summarizing the two hacks here, 1 is use your scoreboard to add elegant borders. 2, if you make a mistake, you can usually smooth out the score lines with the scoring tool again. Super handy. Let's use hack number 5 to finish this card. Now check this out. I've got all these leftover paper strips. I always save them because I never know when I'll need a custom size for adding dimension to a sentiment or a card element. Especially when I run out of foam strips, like it happened recently when I ran out of the really narrow foam strips and these came to the rescue. So just to demo this point, I'm going to use these paper strips as dimensional backing instead of my usual foam strips. If I remember correctly, I most likely picked this up from Jennifer Maguire's channel. I just need a few that are roughly the same width and thickness. Doesn't have to be perfect, close enough works. Okay, I'll grab a few more strips to make sure the backing is nice and even. I want to support the whole panel well. And if I need more, I can always go back and grab them. Let's go with these 3 strips for now. First thing I'm going to do is just stack them and stick them together. And now I'll stick this behind the card front. Next, I'll trim off the excess. I need to color in the stamped images, so I'll do that off camera, then come back to finish the card. I'm back. Here's how the card turned out. Super simple. I used alcohol markers to color in the stamped images, added a few tiny butterflies and hearts with some small stamps that I found in my stash, and finished everything off with a bit of white gel pen detail. I'm going to just stick the finished panel onto the card front and it's done. That's it. Simple, sweet, and finished. Keep watching to see how you can take your card presentation to the next level with a custom envelope. Now, if you've caught my pattern paper video, you might have already seen this clever trick. But if not, I highly recommend checking that video out. I share so many fun ways to use your pattern paper over there. The envelope I'm using today already has adhesive on the flap, which definitely makes life easier. I'm grabbing the bold pattern paper I bought once upon a time from the dollar store. It's super thin, and that actually works perfectly as an envelope liner because it won't create extra bulk. Plus, the design is pretty bold, so I wouldn't normally use it on the front of a card. Here's what I'm doing. The flap of this envelope has a little bit of an angle to it. It's not a straight cut, so I'll keep the width a little narrower so I don't have to angle the paper when I'm trimming it. You could if you like, but I'll keep it really simple. Also, I don't really need the liner to go all the way down inside the envelope. About halfway is perfect. No one's really going to see the rest of it, and it helps keep your envelope lighter, especially if you're planning to mail it. I'm using a pencil to lightly mark where I need to cut the paper. I'm just sliding the liner into the envelope. Next up, I'm grabbing my trusty bone folder to give that fold a nice crisp crease, and there we go. I'll apply some liquid glue and then I'll fold the flap of the envelope over to press the liner into place. Lined halfway, nice and light, but still super cute and adds that special touch. Now I'm thinking if I should add a little bit of this pattern paper to the back of the envelope. I think I'm going to do it. It definitely looks better that way, don't you think? That's it. Cute card, cute custom matching envelope. I see it needs just a tiny bit more glue here. Done. Such a simple upgrade, and it makes the whole presentation feel so much more finished. In the next hack, I'll show you how to create your own DIY stencil so you can stretch your cover plate dies a little more creatively. I don't have a matching stencil for this cover plate die, and I would like to use my Acetate by Sam & Hurley to create a card front. And for that, I need a stencil. I'm applying some clear packaging tape on this piece of heavyweight cardstock. I'd like to reuse the stencil, and the clear packaging tape is going to protect the surface of the cardstock, which will allow for reusing the stencil because it will prevent the paper from buckling under the moisture from the paste and obviously getting the paste onto it. I had to run this through the die cutting machine thrice, but I still see that the pieces haven't cut through completely, probably because of the packaging tape, especially where I overlapped the tape. Let me clean this up off camera so you don't have to sit and watch me do that. All right, I'm back, and I've got to be honest, this took me a little longer than I initially expected. The die I used for this project was super intricate, and it didn't cut cleanly in a few little spots. I can still see some paper fibers sticking around, so I'll use some painter's tape and gently lift off that leftover fuzz. Works like a charm. To clean up those little bits that didn't cut through completely, I used a sharp craft knife on my cutting mat and carefully trimmed them away. If you've got stubborn fuzz left over, you can also gently scrape it away with the side of your blade. It cleans up beautifully. This particular die cut piece is actually perfect for what I've got planned next. I'm using some black cardstock and applying Acetate by Sam & Hurley through this die cut, which is essentially acting as a stencil. First, I need to make sure the stencil piece is nicely centered on my cardstock. Once it's in place, I'm using painter's tape again to hold it down securely. That way, nothing shifts while I'm applying the paste. The tape also protects my glass mat from any stray paste. Acetate is quite thick and wet, so it does take a little bit of time to dry completely. I usually like to leave the panel taped down because it helps prevent the cardstock from warping as it dries. But today I'll use a heat tool since I need this to dry fast since I'm recording. Any leftover paste can go right back into the jar. I don't waste any precious supplies around here. Also, just a random side note, I really hope I don't manage to get any of this on my white sweater. I'm using a baby wipe to clean off my tools and my hands as I go because this paste dries really fast. Since I taped everything down so well, my glass mat stayed nice and clean. Huge win. Now I'm going in with a lovely green shade. There's still a little bit of blue left on this part of the stencil, but honestly, I don't mind at all. It's subtle and kind of pretty, don't you think? Last but not least, for this layer, I'm adding a shade called Clear Skies. It's this gorgeous soft blue color. I'm not going to save what's left of this particular blue though, as it's gotten a little mixed with the green. Time to carefully lift the stencil, but there is a small rip in the stencil here. Not great, but I'll definitely make it work. I'm setting this panel aside to dry completely and grabbing another baby wipe to clean off the stencil. I'm placing the stencil on a paper towel and trying to gently rub off some of the residual glitter from the paste. Not sure if it's going to come off entirely, but I can definitely reuse it. This was my first time using paste with a DIY stencil like this, so it's definitely been a bit of an experiment. I normally use ink and get a 2-for-1, inked stencil and stencil background. Of course, to get a 2-for-1, you can't use the packaging tape on top, but you probably figured that out already. It's actually drying really nicely. You can still see a little bit of the packaging tape here, but I'll remove it once the panel is dry and go over with a black Sharpie to even out the color in case of any residue. Time for the heat tool. The panel's nearly dry, but the cardstock warped just a tiny bit because we added moisture and heat. But absolutely no flaking, so I think it's going to hold up really well. The stencil's dry now too. I think I might keep this one especially for paste and sprays and cut a fresh version if I want to use it with ink. Keep watching to see how you can stretch your supplies even further with a similar hack. Here's a little trick for you. Hit both the front and the back of your warped cardstock with the heat tool to help flatten it back down. So here we are with our next clever trick. I have another beautiful background die, which I think is also from Waffle Flower. I wish I had saved the packaging, but back then I never thought I'd be making videos. Anyway, the first step of this hack is similar to the last one we used, which is basically cutting out a background, and I've already cut 2 pieces using this die. However, you can get the same effect with just the die as well, but I'll use a die cut because I can get another 2-for-1 or even a 3-for-1 later. What I'm going to do now is carefully glue these 2 die cut backgrounds together to give our design some lovely dimension. These are cut from heavyweight Neenah Classic Crest cardstock, so it holds the shape beautifully. It's preferable to use thick cardstock for this technique because we need as much bulk as we can get. Let's go ahead and stick this down really well because we are actually going to use this layered die cut as a makeshift embossing plate. Now, I did place this die a tiny bit crooked when I cut it the first time, so one little part got slightly cut off, but that won't impede the process and I can easily trim it later if I reuse this die cut. Next, I'm bringing in my die cutting machine so we can emboss this. When I'm embossing a shape, the first thing I always check is the rubber mat. It has to be clean. Mine was really dusty and even had a strand of hair on it. You definitely don't want that stuff getting embossed onto your paper. So I'm just using a Swiffer to clean it off because static can attract anything. And I've already cleaned out my die cutting machine and the plates. If you're using a Spellbinder's machine, it tells you on platform B what sandwich to use. Platform A on the bottom, then platform B on top. Next, you'll place your die cut background, or you can also use the die instead of the die cut. I'm using my rubber mat as part of the embossing sandwich, and to keep everything from moving around, I'm going to use tiny pieces of washi tape to hold these die cuts in place. And now, it's time for the big reveal. Look at that. It's beautifully embossed. Even the stitching detail shows up, although it's a little subtle. But if I had added another layer, it would really pop. You can use either side of this panel because both look great. And this could make such a simple and elegant card. I could also stencil over this to create a third completely different look. So you get a 3-for-1. With the next couple of hacks, you can stretch your supplies even further. Keep watching. Now here's the next hack, which I watched Jennifer McGuire show, I think. I don't have black foam tape, so I just took a Sharpie and colored the edges. You don't see a stark white border. It blends right in. So you don't need to have separate rolls of white and black foam tape. When you don't have the perfect resource, just become resourceful. I may have accidentally discovered this hack about 3 years ago while struggling to keep my card panels from getting skewed. If you peel off all the foam tape backing at once, the card front can stick right away and you can't move it around. But if you peel the backing paper partially, it acts like a little spring. It lets you position everything without fully committing until you're ready. So now I'm going to make sure everything is aligned properly, and there we go. Now we've got some nice dimension here and it's perfectly positioned. This next hack is another brilliant trick from Jennifer McGuire. What would we do without her genius, right? So I saved the negative pieces from the die cuts because I want to get the letter spacing just right. Let me show you what I mean. This is how I plan to keep everything aligned properly. I've saved the negative space as a guide, and here's a little hack. I cut really close to the edges so I can find the center on the card front easily, and that would keep the sentiment centered as well. Now, before I adhere the sentiment, there's one thing I need to do. I want to stack a few more layers, and for that I've already cut out some white cardstock. To help with gluing, I'm using some non-stick paper. This is actually just the backing from a double-sided adhesive sheet. It's going to make this process so much easier and prevent sticky messes from happening. So first, I'm going to place the layer down. Then I can apply the glue without worrying about it sticking to anything underneath. I can just pop the piece right back into the opening, like a little puzzle piece. I'm checking to make sure none of the glue oozed out and stuck to the paper. That would ruin the clean look. Now I'm doing a second layer the same way. Add glue, fit it in. And this time I'm using the silver piece on top. Just drop it right into place. It fits perfectly. Once it's in, I lift the negative piece to make sure nothing's stuck, and look at that. No overhang, no mess, it's perfect. I want to keep everything spaced just the way it's meant to be, so I'm centering the whole thing. A magnetic mat really helps here. It holds everything in place while I work. I'm going to use a generous amount of glue this time because I'm sticking it down onto glitter cardstock, which is not the easiest surface. There is also a tiny little heart that's the title for the eye. Because I put the pieces back into the original negative opening, everything stays perfectly aligned and spaced and nothing gets distorted or stretched. With the next hack, I'll show you how to space your letter die cuts if you're using an alphabet die to create your sentiments. I use this trick a lot when I'm creating personalized cards with the recipient's name on the card front. Now I want to add the word hello on my next card, and I'll use those paper scraps I always save. I think I had done some ink smooshing on this one. So I've got my dies here. I'll use some washi tape to hold the dies in place. Let me go ahead and cut this out and I'll be right back. The first thing I'm going to do now is place these letters on the grid on my glass mat. It's really helpful to have a grid mat for this. I'll also bring in my T-ruler to make sure they all line up nice and straight. I'm just making sure everything lines up. I can see the grid lines and I'm spacing the letters out by keeping one grid line in between. Alright, now I'll carefully remove my T-ruler. Next, I'll bring in some press and seal. One thing to keep in mind with press and seal is it can have a lot of static. So I'll hold it down carefully at one end and gently drop it onto the letters. I can see that it shifted just a little bit, so I'll pull it back and adjust. That's better. I just need to fix the E. That one's tricky because it's right in the middle. I'll center the press and seal now over the piece of black cardstock and adhere it with some liquid glue. So now we've got a perfectly spaced, perfectly lined up sentiment. And if you haven't watched my other hacks video yet, where I go over the press and seal trick in more detail, definitely check it out. I shared 20 card making hacks in that video and the link will be in the description. Here's how I finished off this card. Remember the faux embossing I did earlier and the sentiment we just created? I trimmed it down into a narrow belly band. And now we're at the final hack. Now I'm going to add some pops of color as embellishments. When I add the drops, they look kind of pointy. Now, if you just tap these out a little bit, it spreads out and becomes this beautiful round shape and resemble enamel dots. This is a great hack I learned from another crafter, Lucy Patrick. This makes me feel like using my pops of color more now that I know how to make them look decent. For this one, I think I'm going with orange. I'll tap the card like this and see how they're flattening out. They're flattened out perfectly and look just like enamel dots. I'll let it dry completely first so I don't ruin the card. I love how it turned out. Please let me know in the comments which one is your favorite hack that you'll definitely use on your next card project. Make sure you watch the first part of this crafty hacks video, and if you have a collection of washi tapes that you'd love some ideas for, I recently made a video on how I use them to make cards and gift tags. Make sure you watch that video here.